Oh boy, welcome to the Not the Top 20 podcast Spygate reaction episode. Southampton have been kicked out of the Championship playoffs by an independent commission appointed by the EFL to provide the sanction to allegations of spying, pending an appeal heard today. We are going to get deep into it, George. The details coming out of the hearing are sensational in every meaning of the word. Spying, low-speed chases around golf clubs, whistle blowing, and its outcome obviously is hugely impactful on a number of levels. All told, this has been one of the most extraordinary stories in Football League history.
In like football, on Tuesday evening, one of the biggest, longest waits in recent football history came to an end when we found out what the independent commission decided to do in Spygate. But I joke, but I tweeted during the Premier League games how Arsenal were going to win the league in an hour, and the biggest story in football was in the EFL. In the BBC News at 10, after Arsenal won the Premier League, the first story was Spygate, followed by Arsenal. Like, this is something. And the amount of messages I got last night, it was incredibly annoying that it was during my kids' bath time and bedtime. But the amount of messages I got when the news broke yesterday was, from people that I didn't really know even considered football as an interest. This has really kind of cut through, and understandably so. It's really interesting. It's a story about cheating. It's a story about sporting merit. Ridiculous details that have come to light in the last, as we expected they would do, in kind of the Athletic long read, and the Telegraph done a couple of pieces. It's proper, ITV drama stuff, really. And crucially, it polarizes opinion. I think it sits uneasy with quite a lot of people, the severity of the punishment. For others, I think cheating is normally met with a pretty zero tolerance rule. But the most important thing is this is unprecedented. Like, we've never seen a team that had been knocked out of the playoffs reinstated a couple of days before the game. The game is on Saturday. There are still, we're recording this kind of midday on Wednesday. We still don't know necessarily what's happening with the Southampton appeal to. An incredible 24 hours, and it's not over yet. And high drama. We're
going to try and tell this story from as many perspectives as possible, with as much detail as we can that we've gathered this morning. We want to do it properly. We'll start with the exact wording of the ruling, right? The commission expelled Southampton from the playoffs after the club admitted to multiple breaches of EFL regulations related to unauthorised filming of other clubs' training. It's also received a 4-point deduction that will be applied next season. The effect is that Middlesbrough are reinstated into the 2026 Championship playoffs and will play in the playoff final against Hull City on Saturday afternoon. If Southampton's appeal, which will be heard on Wednesday afternoon, this afternoon as we record, if their appeal is successful and they get reinstated after Borough have been reinstated, then Southampton Hull would be played at 4:30. Middlesbrough Hull will be played at 3:30. Saints were first charged on Friday the 8th of May, but further charges were issued on Sunday the 17th in related to additional breaches, and those arose from matters identified after the initial proceedings involving Middlesbrough. They admitted breaches of regulations, and they concerned fixtures against Ipswich Town in that massive game a couple of weeks ago, and against Oxford United in December. They do have a right to appeal, and subject to the outcome, it could result in a further change to Saturday's fixture. So Southampton appealing. Of course, that will happen this afternoon, and we expect by the end of today that we'll know what the verdict of the appeal is. I guess from a Middlesbrough point of view, they have unsurprisingly welcomed this ruling and called it a clear message for the future of our game regarding sporting integrity and conduct. George, is this the right outcome in your mind?
I mean, we all have opinions on this, and I think before kind of getting into the weeds of those, because my opinion is no more relevant than other people's, like, we should look at what has actually happened and why it's happened. Because conversing with people and reading things, I think there's quite a lot of confusion as to why these sanctions have been put in and what they've been put in for. And it seems to me to be a fairly crucial line through the expulsion from the playoffs. And this comes around the idea that, well, it's not an idea, it's a fact. The EFL playoffs are a separate competition. So it's not the same as the league competition. It's a separate knockout competition. And therefore, the two punishments for the Borough offence in which they were caught, and in the two allegations which they've admitted to, we have no idea if there are other allegations, but it would seem to me unlikely that you would spy on Oxford in December and then not do it again until April. But, they've admitted to 2, and that's where the deduction has come from. There is an account on Twitter, SLBSN. I'm not going to try and say it. There are no vowels in there. Yeah, who is a football and lawyer, basically a football fan and a lawyer who posts some very interesting threads. And even though he thinks that the punishment is harsh, he wrote a thread before a couple of days ago, I think on Monday, around the Swindon Town situation and how Swindon have been knocked out, or been thrown out, I should say, of the EFL trophy for fielding an ineligible player. And there is therefore precedent that if you are gaining an advantage and doing so unfairly in a knockout competition, there is precedent to be thrown out. And that has happened various times in football. I think it's also important to have like a wider lens and note that happens a lot in other sports. Like if you are caught in other sports, like take doping as an example, people will be like, whoa, this isn't doping. I'm not saying it is, but that is an example where a club or an athlete or whatever else can make a decision to try and get themselves an unfair advantage over the opposition. And if they're caught doing that, they are generally thrown out. You've got examples such as dangerous riding in horse racing. If you're caught to be riding dangerously in order to gain an advantage, you can be thrown out. In athletics, if you do two full starts, or even one, I think it is now, you're thrown out because it shows that you are maybe trying to gain an unfair advantage. Like, this isn't novel, but in football, it's weird because for us, it's like, whoa, this never happens really. But there's quite a lot of precedent around sport for this to be, a pretty normal thing to happen when you're caught cheating. So the expulsion from the playoffs is a reaction to them spying on Middlesbrough within 72 hours of the game. The conversation around, well, Borough were brilliant in the first half of that game, or like how much advantage could they have got anyway, or Will Salt says that he deleted all of the content anyway. All of this stuff just doesn't come into it. Like, it doesn't matter. The punishment is for the act of, or the deliberate nature of the decisions made within a football club to try and gain that unfair advantage and to break the rules. There's also conversations around why didn't the EFL put a law in? We spoke about this on Monday. And the more I think about it and the more that comes out, it seems like it's probably fair that if there is a breach of this rule, as has happened here, you then gather evidence and you present it to an independent panel who then decide the outcome dependent on the lengths you've gone to do this, how systemic it is. So then the points deduction that comes off the back of this, the 4-point deduction, that is a result of the historical breaches from the season gone by. So it's basically 2 different punishments for 2 different offences in 2 different competitions. Like, that's why it's come about this way. What do I think of it? The longer time goes on and the more that we read about it, and we'll get into some of the details shortly, I find it pretty hard to be sympathetic with anyone involved at Southampton apart from possibly the players if they didn't know, but most importantly the fans. Like, I feel sorry for the fans. It's interesting to see in the last 48 hours or so that it does feel like fan feeling has pivoted from blaming the EFL to blaming their club and wondering how this has been allowed to happen. I say I feel sorry for the players. There's obviously that picture of Taylor Harwood-Bellis doing the spy sign to Aidan Morris in the second playoff semi. So if you're going to do that, can you then really be that upset when it comes to light that this is actually not okay?
Hubris.
Yeah. But then the other thing to note, which rankles with me, there were reports yesterday, and obviously all we can go on is media reports, right? But there's reports yesterday that Ton Reckert's defence was that this is common in Europe, which I've seen Kevin Hatchard, for example, the European football expert, say that he didn't know it was common in Europe.
Yeah.
But it's common in Europe, and therefore he didn't know that it was not okay in English football. If that's true, which why then? Firstly, is Will Salt in Middlesbrough changing clothes and running away when he's caught? There's a report that's out at the moment around when they sent someone to Ipswich Town. They dressed up in an Eastleigh kit because Eastleigh were training at there at that time.
Ipswich were training at
Ipswich
Eastleigh's ground, which is near
ground.
Southampton.
Exactly, so they trained in an Eastleigh kit. Like, there are so many, like the covert nature of the spying, the way they've gone about it. And there's also a report that the panel were presented a picture of a guy in kind of camouflage, and the face was replaced by Will Salt's face. Like, basically they made a meme of their own analyst being a spy. If all this stuff is true, then I find it very hard to believe that Ton Rekker and his staff didn't know this wasn't okay. And it almost feels like internally they were celebrating their own decisions to behave in this way.
Yeah, and it's hard to have sympathy based on all of that, I would say, particularly because more reporting is that Southampton, those running the club at the top of the club, felt somewhat bullish even in the last couple of weeks, basically because they were like, wow, they're not going to kick us out, are they? That would be like that would be a pretty big deal. Like, I'm sure they won't go that far. Again, hubris being shown, and unfortunately the pride before the fall, if you like. Yeah, I think, and we talked about this on Monday, I personally did, I find cheating like this difficult to take. I think that sporting integrity is personally very important to me, and Kim Hellberg actually summed it up very well in his post-match interview, talking about how in this sport and the way that this sport is set up, there are plenty of avenues to win games, plenty of advantages that you can have, and some of them you can control and some of them you can't control. And one of the ones, and the main one really, that a coach, a head coach, a manager, these guys who are held up as the most important people within a club and the most important people in terms of a team's results, in many cases, one of the things that they can control is how they set their team up, and they are allowed to do that without the opposition spying on them. So it needed for me to be a sporting sanction. Any talks of fines would have been not enough for me. It would not have been enough deterrent. And frankly, if it had only been a points deduction for next season and they were to be promoted, then they would be buzzing with that. That would not punish the advantage gained by doing this in this campaign. So I do think it needed to be something directly applicable to the advantage that they well, at least tried to gain. Whether they did or not is up for debate, and not one that we're that interested in. And then, yeah, just on those incredible details, you've touched on a few of them there. I want to basically thank the reporting from The Athletic, The Telegraph in particular, TalkSport, The Daily Mail, all things I've read this morning that have helped us give to you a clear picture, because a lot of you have actual jobs and probably can't spend your days reading, or at least mornings
probably still do.
reading all these articles. So basically, the analyst was next to a tree, not even behind a tree, to the side of the tree. We've all seen the picture.
If it was behind the tree, you couldn't see it,
I would imagine. And it's reported that the in-house media team of Borough was standing on the sidelines, chatting, watching training as normal, and a photographer that was there to take pictures of training, which is also very normal, spotted something suspicious, and having zoomed in, could see what he ultimately, I guess, took a picture of, which we've all seen. And the members of the media team apparently flanked the unaware observer, moving in from the sides so as not to scare him off prematurely. I'm directly quoting a piece in The Telegraph here. By the time he realised he'd been spotted, it was too late. He was challenged to identify himself and refused, allegedly shoving one of the members of staff as they tried to grab him. Although sources at Borough initially claimed this guy had professional surveillance equipment, pictures leaked in the following days showed a top-of-the-range iPhone and plug-in headphones. Those who challenged him claimed he was live streaming the session and may have been talking to someone remotely. As he did so, the spy, realising the danger he was in, ran off in the direction of the golf course clubhouse and emerged a short time later in a change of clothes. When CCTV was studied afterwards, it appeared the man had stashed a holdall in a toilet cubicle before going out to record the training session. When he emerged, he was wearing different clothes and was holding the bag as he made his way to a car and drove off. Flipping to The Athletic's reporting, as I try and build a picture of events here, they say that Southampton had actually booked him to stay for 2 nights in Middlesbrough. So he allegedly would have been there the next day as well, maybe to watch some penalty training or something like that. The plan for him was to go back to the training ground for a second day until he was spotted. One thing that's really important here that I'm not sure, we're also excited about the juicy detail. For me, one of the juiciest details, George, is the whistleblower.
Yeah.
Seems to have been a key part of the evidence and therefore the outcome. A whistleblower from within Southampton came forward to talk to Middlesbrough, and it appeared to confirm their suspicion that spying had been a common occurrence under Tonda Eckert. The whistleblower is understood to have claimed that team meetings included references to opposition data being gathered from the training ground, and there was even an accusation that a text message instructed an analyst to travel to an opposition's training ground after they had just changed managers. The club involved has an open training ground that is easily visible from the road. That club was Oxford United. I've got more juicy details, but I'd love to just ask you how weird it is to know that Oxford United and their interim manager Craig Short were have been admitted to have been spied upon by Southampton ahead of a league fixture in which you only bloody beat them.
Yeah, didn't do much good, did it? Again, irrelevant. It's it's not a big surprise, given I'm kind of thinking as I say, them spying in December, to me, the biggest thing to take from this is that they were doing it in December.
Mm-hmm.
So any idea that this was a new thing or like a recent development, I'm not going to try and sit here and persuade you they've been doing it from December through to April, but we know that they were doing it in December, and that alone is a bit of a smoking gun. There is an element to me that does wonder with this appeal, like the 4 points. One of the criticisms I'm seeing a lot from Saints fans, or even neutrals, is that this feels rushed, right?
Mm-hmm.
This feels rushed, and they've had to do it quickly because of the playoff final. And I would agree with that, but almost in like Southampton's favour, where it feels like more scrutiny over what happened over the course of the season could possibly only be a bad thing for Southampton. Like, unless we are sitting here totally believing that the only 3 occasions they did this were Oxford, Ipswich, and Borough.
If it is 2 points per proven allegation, which a 4-point deduction would suggest it is, what if?
What comes
what
next?
If 10 get discovered?
What if the judge? It's a one-man judge who they're presenting to this afternoon.
Yeah.
And what if he looks at this and he goes, "This is ridiculous. Like, you've been doing this all season. What are you doing, lads?"
It might be, as you say, in everyone's interest once the dust settleth.
Yeah, just to move on.
Just to go like, cool, that was weird, wasn't it? Should we? -4. We'll take it.
The other thing to mention here is that there's another situation looming here, and that is going to be with the FA, because it's not up to the EFL or the independent panel or whoever else to take action against the individuals involved. Tonda Eka, I'd be absolutely staggered if he manages Southampton ever again. I'd be staggered if he's allowed to work in English football anytime soon. Even if Southampton win their appeal, I'd be pretty surprised if he's in the dugout at Wembley. And that is coming, as well as the Southampton sporting director, who, I assume is complicit in this. There's also a part, like, I have very little sympathy for Eka. I've got very little sympathy for anyone involved. But like, on a human level, I do kind of hope that they're okay. I hope that Will Salt, who is a young intern analyst, like, I'm sure we have no idea how he felt about the fact that he was having to do this. He might have been delighted to go and play this role of spy. He might have been coerced. Like, we have no idea how it's come about, but this is a big story, and it must be pretty terrifying for a young guy to be thrust into the spotlight like this. So I do hope that he's got people around him who can kind of look after him, because I can't imagine that this is particularly easy, even if I don't sympathise with the actions themselves. Yeah.
It was The Athletic that reported that amazing detail that the spy who spied on Ipswich was wearing an Eastleigh kit, as that's where Ipswich were training. I mean, clever, to be honest, but ultimately not clever. The Athletic also saying that 2 of the club's analysts gave evidence at the hearing in which they expressed remorse for their actions, but said they were pushed into the spying trips. And Eka, in his evidence, claimed he was not aware that such behaviour was against the rules in England, as it was widespread in European football. And you've already mentioned it, but let's mention it again. The Telegraph saying that Borough were also given a damning photograph that was shared internally at Southampton from December, showing a soldier in full camouflage gear. The face of the soldier had been replaced with an image of Salt. This has got to be a ChatGPT AI one, hasn't it? Probably.
Oh,
I think we can all basically picture that. So Borough have been reinstated, and Middlesbrough play Hull at Wembley with a chance of making the Premier League, obviously having lost very narrowly in those 2-legged semi-finals. We are going to do a separate episode previewing that football match in the way that we normally preview football matches. This is more about Spygate and its consequences. But a lot of people might also be looking at this and go, God, Borough in some ways have got a bit lucky here.
Yeah.
Like, could we not have just banished Southampton and Hull? Cheers, you've got a bye, you're in the Prem. I mean, I don't really have a very strong view on this. I'm personally happy that the playoff final's going ahead, and I'm not surprised that the EFL and the Independent Commission are protecting the fixture going ahead, because it would be a very big mess if it didn't. But I can certainly see where people are coming from of like, okay, well, you didn't... you got spied upon. That was difficult. It was definitely worth a sanction. But should you be playing for a shot at the Prem?
So I think, like everyone else during this whole saga, my assumption was that the EFL would be very, very reluctant to get rid of the Championship playoff final.
Yeah.
But again, the more I've read about this, the more, and even though, as much as I am probably in agreement that the right course of action has been taken, and that the punishment that Southampton are facing, albeit brutal is just. There is something in me that finds the bar reinstatement quite difficult to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
However, going back to what we spoke about at the top of the show, you have to again, and I know that it's difficult to do, but you have to again think of the playoffs as being a completely separate competition to the league season. So you have to ignore all of the other teams they played in this period of time. Like, I know we might not want to, and it might be weird to do that, but you have to, in terms of like the way that these decisions have been made and the way that the competitions are set out, where the league season and the playoff season are two divided competitions. You have to look at it that way. And so the offence that occurred within 72 hours of the first leg semi-final was in the playoffs. They've been thrown out of that competition, and therefore you have two options to take. Either you uphold the results of the games that occurred after that, which I think would seem bizarre. Like, you can't be thrown out of a competition because of an event that happened before a game, but then uphold the terms of that game, or you throw them out from basically the moment that the offence occurred. And that has to kind of be the way to go about this. I said on Monday, the fairest thing would be to try and find Wrexham and bring them back to a semi-final, which would never happen. It probably isn't to do that. It's obvious, if I was a Millwall fan, I'd be pretty frustrated that we finished above Middlesbrough. We lost over 2 legs. We don't get a chance to play in the final. But again, the team that you played against are still in the competition. Like, it is... There's
just no way where it's fair for everyone.
No,
right?
This kind of has to be it
Yeah.
in a way, and I don't think it has to necessarily be because of the golden goose, the playoff final. I think it's just a case of this team did this, therefore they are booted out, and we aren't going to entertain the notion that those 2 games are upheld because they cheated before it happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is kind of the way it had to be.
Tom Derecker, as you mentioned, we will wait and see what happens to him. Potentially facing an FA charge. Some scrutiny on the sporting director, Johannes Spors, as well. Reports that there is a chance he may have been part of this spying operation. Taylor Harwood-Bellis is being talked about a lot, mainly because he celebrated Southampton's winning goal, which was a cross from Shay Charles that skidded all the way in, by making binocular gestures at the magnificent Aidan Morris, which understandably wound people up a lot. And so lots of people mentioning that. And also TalkSport reporting that players, including captain Taylor Harwood-Bellis, are said to be raging at having their shot at a place in the Premier League and the lucrative salaries and status that come with it snatched away. So that is another angle. The Southampton players wondering how they might respond to this. And that's quite a difficult one to get your head around. Southampton fans, they had sold out their full allocation for Wembley. They won't have their day out. They certainly won't have their Premier League promotion. If that's what would have happened, it's absolutely horrendous for them in so many ways. And frankly, there's lots of people laughing at Saints fans, now looking stupid because they initially defended their team. I don't think that is specific to Southampton fans. I think every single club in the country, had they been at the heart of this spying storm, I think the broad response from within the club's fan base would have been pretty similar. A lot of them defending the club to the hilt blindly without knowing what's going on because that's what they do. And some people saying this might be a bit problematic and I'll be very embarrassed if it is proven. They weren't all blindly defending their club and now look stupid. Some of them were, but even to them, I want to say, like, don't worry, I'm pretty sure every single club would have had a group of fans doing that as well.
A couple of friends of mine who are Southampton fans, one of them, his little boy, who's like 7 years old, had written a birthday card, which was a book documenting him and his dad's trip to Wembley on Saturday. Another one of them messaged during the news breaking last night, saying, "Well, I'm looking forward to waking up my son in the morning and telling him we're not going to Wembley."
Oh my god!
Like, it is
horrible,
brutal. This, like, it's we can enjoy the drama and we can talk about it, but like it's like horrendous for fans. And as I say, the blame, we are all, as football fans, we are, our emotions are controlled by the people that run our clubs, and that's the case for owners who've mismanaged football clubs, and the fans had to pay the price for it. That's the case for fans of Brentford and Brighton who've had like excessive joy because they've got incredible custodians of their club. And in this case, Southampton fans have been let down massively by those in charge. Like, whether you agree with the sanctions or not, there's no getting away from the actions that have taken place. And even if they weren't expelled from the playoffs and they were hit with a huge points deduction for next season, which, looking at it now was never really going to be the case, the same would still count. So like my heart goes out to all of those Saints fans who've had to have similar conversations today.
And Hull City, I don't think they're very happy, if I'm honest. They've had their opponent changed a week after the semi-finals concluded, with 3 days to prepare for a new opponent. It's been reported they've already had 4 training sessions, and they were aimed at a game against Southampton. If Hull lose in the final and Middlesbrough win promotion, they will try everything to prove that this was unfair on them, and the conversation will rumble on into the summer.
Maybe Middlesbrough should invite a Hull analyst to come and watch training. Be good PR, just to get ready for it.
That would be very, very good PR. And as for Hull, well, Ollie McBurney, what a day he had on Tuesday, snubbed by Steve Clarke for the Scotland World Cup squad. And then this, he tweeted, "Mad day all round. Nothing changes. We take what's ours on Saturday."
It's very interesting, just because I was tweeting the betting odds quite a lot. It was interesting to note that Hull's promotion price came in massively off the back of the news, given Middlesbrough the same price as Saints were to beat them. I don't really understand how that's happened, but there you go.
Well, if you don't understand how that's happened,
no, I don't understand how that's happened.
I'm not going to understand how that's happened. I think that's probably all of our thoughts on Spygate 2.0, which has been, one of the
for now
most insane stories that we've certainly ever covered in 10 years of doing this. Our Championship playoff final preview will be coming soon. We think the game will be played between Hull and Middlesbrough. Until we know that, we won't be releasing anything. So enjoy this episode, and once this is done, we'll look forward to the match itself this weekend. Thank you, and go well.